Now we're going to the keynote speaker. I think Markos is already in our call.
Yes.
Marco?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Hi, Marco. Thanks for joining. It's a really an honor for us to have you in our call.
The honor is all mine.
And if you have slides to share, you can do so. Otherwise, you can just stop.
Yes, that's right. I do have some slides. Let me open the camera as well.
Perfect.
I do have some slides. I don't know how to share them. If you can help me out a little, I'll be.
Yeah, on the bottom you can see the choices. One of them is share content. It's the third from the left. If you go your cursor down, you can see the third bottom on the left.
I can. I think it says
share content.
Yeah, it says that I need to open the preferences and the settings and probably.
Yeah, and then you can choose the screen that you have, your file that is already open, I suppose.
Maybe, Marcos, if you have a Mac, it is most. Do you have a Mac?
I do, yes.
Yes, most probably you should close the WebEx, apply these preferences, and reopen. Otherwise, you cannot share your screen.
Do you want me to do that now?
Yes, we can. Sure, we can wait. It's some seconds. It's really fast.
Okay, I'll do it. If people can ask questions, Vicky, about the innovation program, because I thought it was really fascinating, the presentations, and well done to all of you who are really pushing this. Okay, so I'll be back in a few seconds. Thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So as Marcos said, is there someone who would like to ask any question? Is there someone, a prospect for the cohort 3 maybe, or for in general having a question on the program? We are happy to answer any question on the program until Marcos comes back. We will have okay, Marcos is okay. He's back. I think.
I assume that there wasn't too much time for questions, so.
Yeah. You were very quicker than I thought. So take the stage and thanks again for joining.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Just to say, I know I only have 10 minutes and I don't want to take more time. I'll just try and summarize a little bit some of the things that we are seeing happening in the fintech stage as researchers. Obviously, we don't run any startup, even though myself I'm like mentoring quite a few here in the UK, but also other countries, including as part of the Visa Innovation Program, which is, as I said, really fascinating, and well done to all of you for putting this together and really attracting lots of interesting kind of fintechs and startups to work on very innovative ideas in the Greek context, but also the European context as well. So yeah, some observations that come from our research and the research that I do with colleagues across different universities in the UK and globally. Do I do a quick introduction myself? I mean, for those perhaps that don't know me.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'm an academic. I have this default slide almost in our presentation. So I'm a professor at Manchester Business School. I've been doing fintech research for quite a while. So since I ever started my PhD at the London School of Economics, where I studied the economics of digital innovation in financial services. So I've only been doing this as part of my academic career. I haven't been doing anything else beyond that. And of course, have had the opportunity to I have done a lot of research and had the opportunity to publish quite quite a bit of research. Also, some of it is also publicly accessible, so not just in academic journals, but you can find various publications in terms of reports and books and white papers for larger kind of payment organizations and so on and so forth online. So if you perhaps, I don't know, Google my last name and PDF, you might be able to find some of the work that we've been doing. Now, in terms of observations, and for many of you, because you're all experts, you know much more about fintech than I do. Just to summarize, what is it? Our observations in terms of how the financial services industry is moving forward or transforming with the use of technology and heavily kind of investing in technology kind of ideas the last few years. And obviously, we have seen the emergence of data sharing frameworks across the world. Open banking is one form of implementation that we've seen in Europe. And also the United Kingdom, which is something that regulators have been speculating and talking about for perhaps a lot more before PSD2 becomes a thing across the EU. What we try to observe and basically investigate in the context of financial organizations is how their business models kind of transform as part of new regulation and as part of new trends in finance. And in the context of open banking, in data sharing frameworks like open banking, for us, this is really interesting to see how economic activity is being organized at the firm level. So it's a piece of work that we have been doing with a professor from the University of Oxford, the Side Business School, and other colleagues at Work Business School, which was where I was previously before I moved to Manchester. And we see this kind of unbundling, as you may have seen recently as well in different presentations, but also the rebundling through new business models like platform-based business models. And in that sense, we see a new way of organizing economic activity at the bank level, where banks are not just brokering money anymore, but starting to broker data. Right, so they become trust pillars, not in the financial sense anymore, or just in the financial sense, but also in the data and technology sense. So banks in the future, we see, or at least some of the professionals, but also academics, kind of envision that they will broker trust in a kind of data ecosystem, let's say. So they will safeguard people's identity and will safeguard people's data in that context as well. So it's really interesting transformation at the firm level. Also at the market level, we see quite a bit of movement. So for those of you who are kind of old timers in the financial services sector, you'll probably know that one of the key things that characterize the banks is this kind of vertical integration, right? So we had banks who really try to do everything themselves, like a car manufacturer, for example, right? So you start with an idea, you design a car, you go out and produce the different kind of parts of the car, you assemble the car together in one of your workstations, for example, and then you have a list of distributors that sell the car outside your firm. And banks traditionally have been doing that in a very much product-oriented or kind of fully vertically integrated way. But now with data openness and a lot of these unbundling, as we have seen in the sector, we see that not just the firm level, at the industry level, things are changing and becoming more modular. So we're seeing kind of the entire architecture of the industry kind of moving towards a more modular ecosystem of different actors that do different parts, bits and pieces of the value chain. And I think we're using this diagram in one of our publications with colleagues. As I said, we're working together from Oxford University and Work Business School to demonstrate how we're moving from these kind of pre-regulatory kind of data sharing regulatory age to a more kind of modular architecture of the industry because of the new data sharing models. So that's really interesting as an observation, because now if you consume a service as a consumer, right, a financial service, you're not going to be consuming that from a single entity. There's going to be a lot of entities in the back end, a lot of different technology, financial, and so on and so forth, companies that contribute to this product being delivered in the end into the market. Now, obviously, that's a great opportunity for nascent markets, for new players to come in who do bits and pieces across the value chain, but also has different risks. So if you're part of this debate, and I'm certainly trying to be part of this debate abroad at the regulatory level, but also in the industry, we have seen commentators and people kind of really being worried about security, integration issues, but also resilience, right? So resilience as part of perhaps the different frameworks, regulatory frameworks that we see, regulators are trying to address these resiliency issues as part of a more modular architecture. And a very good example of that is perhaps the Wirecard case, right? So when Wirecard went down and launched or issued kind of its bankruptcy across the regulators in the UK and I'm sure in other countries probably had to freeze any Wirecard relevant kind of transactions. And that had an impact on the entire value chain. So you had firms and even fintechs who were relying on firms like Wirecard basically having their assets frozen and that the customers couldn't access their accounts and so on and so forth. So resilience as part of even security or privacy and other kind of important themes is another thing that we see going forward will be very important. And perhaps there will be, I think already in the United Kingdom, the regulator has announced that they will revisit the regulation as part of the kind of non-bank entities, which now play a big role in these kind of bigger and more modular ecosystem. Now, modularity is not just in the banking sector. We see in other industries like payments overall, for example, where we also see a more distributed architecture, not just modular, but also distributed. And the difference there is obviously that in a distributed architecture, you might even have peer-to-peer payments. The modular architecture is more kind of centralized, more, I guess, in a traditional way, intermediated. But in a more distributed architecture, you don't necessarily have the standard intermediaries, or there is re-intermediation. So you have new intermediaries that come into play. And I guess a good example in this case is a central bank issued digital currencies, which potentially will disintermediate completely or re-intermediate completely the entire way or the entire infrastructure is how payments are happening perhaps in the retail sector. So this is probably number one priority right now in most of the central banks across the world, and we're actually being funded. We made a bid recently for a new research project of central bank digital currencies and the economic implications for the banking sector, but also other kind of institutions around it. Right? So big firms, but also central banks are very interested in seeing what are going to be the fiscal, but also economic implications for private banks, for example, and other entities in this particular domain. The last observation before I close with two very quick notes on COVID, obviously we cannot ignore the new normal, as a lot of people say, is a lot of competition that we see recently from big tech firms, and also very interesting collaborations with big tech firms and also financial institutions and other technology companies, for example. I mean, of course, the Apple Card kind of story is very old now, considering how quickly things are moving, but it's still kind of a very impressive one that cannot be neglected. And I think we were seeing similar moves by other big tech companies, technology companies like Google, who recently kind of announced a potential collaboration with Citibank in the US to provide current accounts. So we see a big move from the big tech companies coming into the financial services sector, but also interesting collaborations between, for example, Apple and Goldman Sachs, or Google and Citibank, but also, in the payment sector, for example, Amazon and WorldPay. So they're really pushing for domination. So they really want to have their footprint, across even the financial services sector as a whole. And this, again, is something that could potentially transform completely the value chains in financial services, or create new layers in the entire architecture, as we'd like to say. So we're also writing a paper on this one with colleagues across 3 or 4 universities, actually, on the role of big tech and strategies they are using to envelop. So there is, in platform theory, there's concepts like envelopment on how big platforms are moving strategically into new domains, more regulated environments that they hadn't participated before. Just to close, a couple of points about, obviously, COVID-19 and the impact that it may have in the financial sector. And I'm just going to put out there a couple of pieces we wrote. One is as part of the World Economic Forum. So in addition to my academic role at the University of Manchester, I'm also part of the World Economic Forum's Global Future Council on Financial and Monetary Policy. And I sit there with another couple dozen really kind of global figures in terms of technology and finance. You know, people from huge companies like Visa, for example, or global banks like UBS, or central banks across the world, and big tech companies, both in the Western world, but also from Asia. And we have been discussing a lot about, COVID-19 and the new normal, as they say, or the isolation economy, as we describe it in this particular piece that I co-authored with Mohit Yoshi, who is one of the global presidents of Infosys, a very large kind of vendor and supplier for financial institutions. So we kind of elaborate a little bit on these ideas and how technology can really play a role going forward. And we try to speculate how things will change. And of course, in a digital first environment, you also might want to maintain still physical kind of interaction, but have a digital first kind of channel of distribution for financial services, but use it in a way that is not just replacing physical infrastructure, but perhaps complement it in an ideal way where it is actually meaningful and makes sense. And this is really important, as a lot of people will be very picky going forward as to what kind of branches or retail stores and so on and so forth will visit. Where do they spend their time outside their homes? And so we'll want to make the best use out of technology in the physical context as well. Lastly, there's another piece, and I know there's going to be probably a bigger discussion here on how COVID-19 impacts even the fintech industry, not just financial services, but fintech. It's another piece we wrote a couple months ago, again, with academics from different universities at the LSE Business Review, which is online and fully accessible if you want to look at it. We see in terms of investment, and obviously, you guys had pretty good success in terms of funding some of your the fintechs that are participating in the Visa Innovation Program. But now we generally see a push towards kind of bigger and less deals, and versus a lot more smaller deals that we could see the years before. So that kind of shows maturity also in the sector, but also the anxiety that a lot of the investors have in pointing more to profits rather than kind of future growth, right? That a lot of the smaller companies wish to capitalize now. And a lot of the deals we see, they're very much data centric. So if you look at some of the largest deals that very big companies did, including Visa and MasterCard, the fintechs that they acquired, obviously they're very much data centric, which kind of shows the importance of data and how the data economy will play in the next few years. I think unavoidably, like a general observation, will be that we'll have market consolidation. We'll probably start seeing fintech to fintech kind of collaborations a lot more often, but also kind of incumbent institutions to fintech collaborations. But certainly things are going to narrow down until I think the market settles and more opportunities in terms of the digital space in financial services will open up when there is this more understanding of where we're going as an industry, I think, overall. So these are just some thoughts and a few observations. There's, as I said, a lot more literature online. Feel free to reach out for some of these papers, but also I think Google is an amazing resource so they can find some of these papers and transcripts on the web. But do keep in touch. I'll be more than happy to hear from you and also participate in your wonderful discussions and conversations. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Marco, for this fantastic wrap-up of the fintech situation at the moment and all your insights. We are happy to stay connected with you, and it's great that you're supporting the Greek fintech ecosystem with your knowledge and insights.
And also Visa Innovation Program as a mentor.
Of course.
Yeah,
as one of our greatest mentors, and thank you very much for this.
No, thanks for having me. Looking forward to seeing the rest of the discussions.